joining us. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into music, and maybe some of your biggest influences, if you feel like you have any?
Yeah. So I grew up in a family who appreciates music a lot. My parents are both teachers and artists, so I was listening to a lot of music from a very young age. I used to like to hang out in the car with my dad and listen to Don Giovanni as he told me the whole story and a lot of Mozart operas. But I also listened to various other things. And I started taking piano lessons in third grade, and shortly after discovered that I liked making up my own melodies on the piano, sometimes more than practicing. But my piano teacher was very supportive of that, and she would always be like, "Oh yeah, you can bring in whatever you want, and I'll play it for you." So that was great. And when I was 12, I started going to the Walden School Young Musicians Program, which is a summer program in Dublin, New Hampshire for creative young people ages 9 to 18. My mom kind of convinced me to go the first time, and I really didn't want to. But I got there and I loved it, and I continued going there for composition for 6 years, basically through high school. And then since then, I went on to college and did composition and kept going through school for a long time. Until I got here. So now I am a composer and an educator just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. I teach at Notre Dame College. I teach some composition and theory classes, and I am on faculty at Walden now, and I have been since 2016. Oh, and influences. I feel like I have a lot of like non-musical influences. I think growing up with my dad as an artist, visual art, and specifically my dad's art, but like just going to museums has always been a big influence. I love working with texts, so various poems, poetry, books. I like children's books a lot. So those have always been some big influences on me, I think.
That makes me think of a couple of things that aren't really on this list, but the Walden experience. I think that's awesome. I didn't know that existed. That is so cool that you're able to now, after going through it and getting this far, having a composing career and everything, go back and do all of that. I just would you be able to speak at all to any like memorable experiences, either as a student and then now an educator at that institution?
Yeah, so I love Walden and I could talk about it all day. It has definitely played a huge part, just like shaping me as a musician and a performer. Um, I think just some of my favorite things about Walden that I got to know, like I started studying theory really young because of Walden, but at Walden it's musicianship, and their whole philosophy is the idea of approaching everything creatively. So when you're studying theory, you're learning what triads are, but it's not just like, this is a triad. It's what can you do with a triad, and what can you do musically? So some of my really close friends to this day were my classmates at Walden. And I have some memories from musicianship classes where we were doing really nerdy drills of like spelling different triads and like running around the classroom and singing them and spelling them, uh, and laughing and thinking it was hilarious, but also learning a lot through that. Um, and also like there are other things. It's like part program, part summer camp. So we always it's in the some of the mountains in New Hampshire. So we'd always hike. We'd sing on top of mountains. Um, and yeah, I think coming back as faculty, it has been really fun to just see the side of things and to see students just approaching Walden and growing. Like there are a lot of students who come back for years and years. So watching students start as really young students, and grow and come to love the program and grow as musicians and just grow as people, and to hear their music performed has just been a really cool experience.
I mean, it definitely sounds like it. Um, I also, I don't know. I was going to be like, is this something you see yourself doing for a long period of time now, that you're on the educator side of it?
Yes. Hopefully, as long as they will have me. I'm also on the leadership team for Walden, so I get to work with them year round. We're planning an in-person, hopefully, program for the summer. So thinking through what that will look like with modifications has been really interesting. But yeah, I think I grow a lot from Walden every summer as a faculty member, both from like working with my students who are so inspiring and so creative, and then just working with the colleagues who are there. It's yeah, Walden. I think I come out of Walden every summer like super excited to teach and to compose more. So I love it, and I definitely hope to be there for a long time.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I guess speaking of your own teaching experience, and then thinking back to you going through your own musical learning, what are some things or some skills you wish you had learned while growing as a musician that you may want to teach to your own students going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I was very lucky in with a lot of my teachers and with a lot of my programs. But I think one of the most valuable things that I have learned that I probably didn't have like a class on ever is just like how to get a piece performed and how to work with performers, both just like in terms of, hey, will you perform my piece, but also how to work with them in rehearsals and how to like be kind and open to feedback and open to criticism and not get offended by it, which I think are really important skills for all composers. And I think I kind of learned it just by having to do recitals at each place where I was. And I don't know, I don't think that would be something that there would be a class on, but I think just learning from performers and talking to people is a really important skill that I think everyone can continue to work on. Also, taxes. I think for musicians, those are terrifying, but I learn a little more every year from that. But I would have loved to have had a class on that in college at some point.
Yeah, the three of us can definitely relate because we spent another meeting staring at a piece of paper that none of us understood. And it's that time of the year, I guess. Continuing down this path on education, I mean, all four of us can relate to the fact that it's been a rough year to stay motivated as an artist and a human being. What are some things that have helped you through this? And from your educator perspective, what are some things that you've either tried to impart on your students to help motivate them, or maybe some things that they've given you um, along those lines?
Yeah. So I think my students have been just a huge motivation in general this past year. Everything is online and I haven't really been going anywhere. So that's been like a lot of my interactions with like other people has been through teaching. So I think just working with them and trying to give them the best possible experience while online has been a really huge motivating factor. Um, and I think I have also just like through them and with them just like learned to be like a little bit kinder and more relaxed, especially as it relates to deadlines and like missing assignments and just like having uh more humanity when it comes to like deadlines and working with people. I really like deadlines, but I am learning to be, I think, more relaxed. From a composer side, I do think for me in general, like deadlines are a way of being motivated. I also think just working with real people and specific ensembles really motivates me. This experience was really helpful. So yeah, working with people, having faces that I can put like a name to is, yeah, it's all about like, I think music is about like human connection. So that motivates me a lot.
That makes me think of um, just I want to know more about some of these connections that you've made over the years, and some of your like favorite experiences that have come out of them, maybe in the form of um, pieces or that you've either written or performed on, or any of those things, or in courses or any of those other things. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Um, yeah, so some of these connections have been through the Walden School. Again, they do a faculty commissioning project every summer where they bring in an ensemble to perform works by faculties. I've been really lucky to work with Splinter Reeds, who's a reed quintet and to have written a piece for them through Walden, but they went on and performed it. Other times working with them was really, really wonderful. And also the Quince Contemporary Vocal Ensemble, I worked with them my first year on faculty. And again, it was just this really rewarding experience of having these words I want to write with, and then having them work their way through it, make suggestions, and continue to perform that afterwards. And then the poet I worked with for that piece is a friend of mine from undergrad at the College of Worcester. And I ended up using her text for a bunch of different things, including my dissertation in Oregon, which was another great experience. The piece was called Pretty Princess versus the Underworld, thanks to Emily Corwin for that title. But yeah, it ended up being for alto and chamber orchestra, and putting that together was a lot of work, but really rewarding. I had a great conductor to work with, and a great soprano or alto to work with. And I was scheduling like millions of different rehearsals, and everyone was just super supportive and willing to be there and participate. So that was really nice.
All right, so you mentioned a poem that you used to, I guess, and I had not really used, but it was involved in the composition process, I suppose. I guess we didn't really ask about this, but could you describe some of your process for composing? Do you audiate ideas, then put them on paper? Do you make voice memos? I know a lot of people that like save their ideas on a voice memos. They'll sing them or play like a rough idea from an instrument.
Yeah, I do a lot of things on paper and by hand. I like to, if I'm writing for a specific group, I like to talk to them first just to get some ideas down. At some point, I usually just sketch out what I'm imagining for the piece, which is usually a lot of words and squiggles on paper. And all of my ideas end up going onto a wall. I have a wall with a ton of pieces of papers on it with just like various ideas. And then I usually leave that up for the whole composition process. If I'm working with text, usually the entire text also goes up somewhere on the wall. So I can just like, if I'm like, oh, that's going to be the melody right there. I end up just writing the melody on the paper. And then usually I do a first draft by hand on manuscript paper, which is a lot of like playing on the piano and singing things and just jotting everything down. Eventually that all goes into Finale on my computer, but then I like to go through a really long editing process because I really enjoy editing and making things better. So usually I'm printing that out and then just going through it, sometimes listening to the bad MIDI version and just making notes of everything I want to change. And that happens for a long time up until usually I'm like, okay, there aren't very many marks on the paper anymore. I think this is good to go. So yeah, a lot of editing and a lot of just handwriting things is my process.
Something you said made me think about something else that you said about your past and being raised in an artist family. I'm wondering if any of these sketches or your wall even could be like standalone works of art themselves, or even scores on their own, or if there's a connection there.
I'm looking at some of them right now. They're fairly not attractive. I think I could probably make them look good. Like I really like doodling. I love like handwriting cards for people for their birthdays and things. And I think graphic notation is really cool. I've never done a graphic score. So yeah, I think they have the potential to be, if I put more time into them. I think a lot of the sketches right now are like things I do in like 5 minutes, just kind of like what is in my brain that needs to get down on paper. So yeah, usually it is just like little squiggles and words, but maybe they have a future potential to be someday.
Do you feel like your process has changed throughout your career or like developed in certain ways? And maybe if so, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think it's actually become more and more by hand the longer I've composed. I guess really it's kind of done this arc where when I started composing, and like granted, like I was really young and it was like these little 8-measure pieces when I was in 3rd grade. That was all by hand. And my mom actually found me a version of Finale Notepad in like 2002 or something. So I could play around. I was like, whoa, this is so cool. I can just like put notes and it plays it back. So I wasn't really using it to like finish pieces. It was just this really fun toy. At Walden, I wrote everything by hand. They encourage handwriting and understanding how to write by hand before putting things into the computer. And then finally, when I went to undergrad, I learned it was just so much faster to just sit down with my computer and put things into Finale. But I kind of had to shift my thinking because I do think when I'm starting just on the computer, there are a lot of parts of it that I don't just intuitively feel as much because it's all on the computer. So like I'm not handwriting it and thinking through like every single note. So eventually, I think it was probably somewhat when I was in my master's program at Butler, I started going back and doing sketches by hand, but then pretty quickly still moving to the computer. And while I was in Oregon, that was when I really started doing full sketches by hand again. So yeah, I think it was kind of this like switch to technology, and then gradually I've been going back to doing things by hand. I think I'm also just much faster at doing things by hand these days. And that was part of what had pushed me into like Finale immediately. But yeah, I think for me, by handwriting everything, I have to think through every single element of the piece. And it just helps me to know my piece inside and out before it goes onto the computer.
Did you use I don't know if this is the right way to ask this question. I was going to say, which of these processes did you use for the piece that you wrote for us? Or how did that go?
Yeah, we talked, I'm looking, I wonder if, no, I'll leave it up there. We talked at some point in like January, and I'm pretty sure that same day afterwards, I did like a really fast sketch of what I wanted the piece to look like. And then that kind of just stayed on my wall for a while. I have a lot of pages of just like ideas, since I knew I wanted something kind of scalar at that point. So I have a lot of sketches of like scaled possibilities I was going to use, and I didn't use a lot of them since I didn't like very many of them. But I eventually like figured out like various collections of pitches I wanted to use. And the majority of it is written out by hand in various places. So I think I got it to a final bar line in different places by hand before putting it in. So yeah, I did that whole process, and I did a lot of editing afterwards, and went through lots of pieces of paper, which are now being recycled.
So that got me thinking, like the things that you decided against, are there things that you felt like maybe just don't fit the character of this piece, but you might use for something else? Are they things that you sketched but said, I don't really like this at all? Are they like a mixture of the two? Like, what do you do with those little snippets that don't make it into the final product?
Yeah, these days I tend to stay in notebooks, and sometimes I'll go back to them. I think for this piece in particular, it was mostly just note collections. Actually, no, wait, no, that's a different piece. Never mind. Yeah, it was mostly note collections that I think some of them felt too similar to things I had used in the past. Some of them were just me just not liking them at all. But I do think it helps me to like write out all the possibilities and just say, I love saying no to things. It's great. In the past, there have been some pieces. I remember one piece when I was at Butler University, and I think I was maybe working on my thesis, maybe. It was some piece, and I had this whole section that ended up being like, this does not belong there. And my professor was like, this does not belong there. And that section actually became a string quartet later on. So I have actually reused some things if I have enough. In the case of this piece, it wasn't really anything. It was just very early ideas. But sometimes it's nice to reuse things in other contexts.
Cool. And I know we already kind of did this, but would you mind just telling us a little bit about the piece you wrote for us, um, and how you feel about it?
Yeah. So this piece is called Breath. It's about the concept of breath. And that's really what my early sketches were. I think you had mentioned when we were all talking that you were interested in like current events and pieces that respond to that. And I really hadn't written or finished a piece throughout the entire pandemic. I just like creativity was not a thing I was feeling at the time. So part of it for me was like, how do I even like begin to like think my way through the past year? And the easiest way for me to do that was thinking about like breath is something simple. It's existed at various times. You are all wind instruments and use breath. Wow, this is something I can work with. So the piece itself, it kind of just looks at breath. It's really frantic and scalar at first. The pitch gradually falls away and they're just air sounds. The air sounds gradually decay and there are just clicks. And then the pitch gradually comes back. And that my original sketch for that was basically like these upward squiggles that slowly disappear. And then there's a melody at the end. It's just it's a 3-minute piece. So it's just a little snippet of breath going away and coming back.
I also just think that's such a is poetic the right word? But it's just a very nice concept about what happens when you have your breath taken away, and can you come back from that, and what would that look like? And I feel like the moments before losing breath are always a lot more what do you call it, anxiety inducing or something like that. Like there's more energy there, and I think you reflect that very well throughout the piece. And then once it goes away and then you like have to have this moment of recollection, it comes back in a more like meditative and even hopeful sometimes way, which I think is just very well done. Yeah,
Thank you.
just wanted to echo things that you had already said.
Thanks.
And before we even, I mean, we have a lot of other time and other more fun questions to ask, but you've mentioned working with your poet friends and your parents at some point and people at Walden. Are there any other people that you would want to, or that have been a profound influence on you in some way that you would want to shout out or like, or anything like that?
Oh, I mean, all of my composition professors have been huge influences on me. I worked with Jack Gallagher at the College of Worcester, who is my undergraduate teacher for all 4 years. And he certainly has like shaped everything that I do these days. I feel like I can still hear him be like, oh no, that notation doesn't look good. You need to do this instead, amongst other things. But I think he made my notation really strong. Michael Shelley and Frank Felice at Butler University were huge influences on me. And Robert Keir and David Crum at the University of Oregon. So yeah, all of my teachers have, I appreciate all of their guidance, and they have always been very supportive of me and have just been really huge influences on honing what I was doing.
And then we've talked about some of the overlap between art and your work, and I'm wondering if there's any like more popular media that you were really interested in, like either movies or TV shows or podcasts or YouTube channels or anything like that that you could see maybe playing into your work in some way.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about them playing into my work. I love watching movies. I love books. The Little Prince will always be my favorite book. I like French things in general. Like Little Prince, I read when I was really young, is by far my favorite book. I think I actually wrote a piece on it when I was at Walden. But I think that somehow in the background is always on my mind. I love a lot of like young adult books. The Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events was a huge series in my childhood. And there are a lot of things in that, like anagrams and codes and weird things. And I sometimes like to think like that concept kind of plays well with music. I listen to a lot of podcasts when I'm driving, which happens less so these days, but also when I'm editing scores. That's more just because I like to have something in the background, but I really can't listen to music when I work whatsoever. I get way too distracted. So I love Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I love Milk Street Radio. I really like cooking, so listening to cooking shows is fun. The Guilty Feminist is one I listen to a lot while while editing my dissertation. So yeah, movies, let me think of, I love Amelie, another French thing. I have a soft spot for Rocky Horror Picture Show. Um, Stardust, The Lord of the Rings was always like a huge part of growing up. So yeah, I think maybe the music, like I listened to a ton of soundtracks when I was younger, and still, so they're in my brain. I'm not sure if they're like a direct influence, but I'm sure just the awareness of them is in my mind somewhere and playing some sort of role while I'm working.
You brought up your passion for cooking, which I remember you brought up the first time we talked too. So I really love food myself. I think most people like food. Describe your favorite meal, whether it's like a meal you like to eat or like your favorite meal to cook, or just talk about food in general.
Oh, okay. Well, my favorite, we're talking about like meals throughout the day. Dessert is my favorite, which to me does count as a meal. I love to bake. I missed pie day because I ran out of time, but I had pulled a pie crust from the freezer. So I made an apple cinnamon galette recently. Yeah, I love desserts. I have a huge sweet tooth. I get it from my grandmother, who always had dessert after every meal. Yeah, I like things that have like spice in them, whether that's like cinnamon and ginger or like spicy things. I also really like breakfast because breakfast is kind of like dessert, but in the morning. And most of my breakfasts are sweet. Like I love making scones and muffins and like sweet breads. Sugary things are like right up my alley. And they're really fun because there's like a process for making them. And then you get delicious things at the end. But yeah, most recently I've been eating an apple galette since that's what's in my fridge at the moment. But there'll be something, I think cupcakes are coming up soon.
I wish there was just a
Yeah.
way, like we have all these apps to transfer money. I wish there was a way to transfer food. I always joke with my friends, like, "Oh, Venmo me some tacos."
Oh, that would be so good. Yeah, no, if we could send them like really fast, that would be perfect. But yeah, I love dessert. It's really good.
That's awesome.
Have you ventured out and tried anything new over the pandemic, cooking wise or baking wise?
Yeah, let's see. I Yes, I'm trying to think what most recently. I made some cream puffs for the first time over the summer, I think. No, maybe it was even earlier. I think sometime early on in the pandemic, I was doing like choux pastry and pastry cream and doing some choux puffs, which was really fun. I had done those. I worked at a bakery for a little while, so like I had done some things at the bakery, but like on my own, I hadn't done them. Um, what else have I done recently? I was doing some bread baking. I finally have a sourdough starter, so I'm slowly venturing into sourdough. But sometimes I have to find the time to do that to make sure my timings line up and I'm not teaching when I'm supposed to be doing things with the bread. So yeah, bread baking has been more recent. At some point, I would love to actually do like croissants, but I think that will take a little more time and practice, but that's like a future goal to work on those.
Now, when I think of food, I also think of foreign countries. And what's a place you'd like to visit other than France? I'm gonna say other than France because I know you probably would love to visit France or probably already been to France.
Yeah, I love France. A lot of places. I mean, these days I kind of just think like anywhere would be nice. I haven't been to Italy or Spain, and I would love to go to both of those places, partially because of the food. Um, I also I've only been to like some places in Europe and North America, and that's it. So I would love to go to Thailand. I think that would be really cool. I would love to visit South America and some of like the countries there. I pretty much, it's so hard because right now I feel like I would like to go anywhere. I have been to Iceland once, but only for a day as a stopover as I was on my way to France. So like I would love to actually spend time in Iceland and be there a little bit longer as well. So I guess those are some of the places right now.
I think we all know the answer to this, but it's just important that everyone else hear it. Cats or dogs?
So cats because I have a cat, but I grew up with cats, a dog, and a rabbit, so I feel
Oh,
really guilty saying any of them. So I have a cat, but for me, they are all equal. It's just as an owner, it's cats, and they're adorable.
And what are your cat's names?
My cat is named Pippin. Yeah, he's really cute. Today is his 11-month birthday because I know that about him. Um, but yeah, he's very sweet and crazy.
Happy birthday, Pippin.
Yay!
so would you say cats are your favorite animals, or if not, what would you say your favorite animal is?
uh my top, so cats for like domesticated pets, obviously cats, but then also dogs and rabbits, since I don't want to insult any of my childhood pets. Top three favorite animals, however, which I have thought about a lot for a long time, are hippos will always be number one. I love hippos. Fiona the hippo at the Cincinnati Zoo is like my favorite hippo who exists. Penguins, and then goats. Yeah, they're all really cute and I love them.
Goats makes me think of my friend Kakia sent me this TikTok of a goat that was trying to play with a dog, and it was so cute. Like it instigated. It started like doing the whole like, bowing about to play with the dog, and then the dog started playing back, and the goat got scared, and it just screamed. All you heard was just ah.
That's adorable. That
It
sounds
was
so cute. Yeah, goats are really funny. They're weird. I love them. I would love to have goats if I had a yard and actually owned a house and had time to take care of them. They're so cute.
And God, same honestly though. Sorry, I'm just thinking about like a dream farm with all of these animals. Um, I mean, other than animals, what else do you, well, and composing and cooking and reading and all these other art things, what else do you like to do for fun? And also, I guess I should maybe frame like, what did you like to do for fun before the pandemic, and how has that changed during, and what do you expect to be fun after?
Yeah. I like long road trips, which has not happened as much since the pandemic, but hopefully soon. For like multi-day, very long road trips, like 8 hours for me is the perfect length for a car drive because you stop once at 4 hours in and then you keep going. So yeah, I love road trips. I have had to be on some for fun, but then also for me, like when I moved from Massachusetts to Oregon, obviously that was a longer road trip. And I also was having a piece performed in Florida at the time. So I drove down to Florida first before going to Oregon because, that makes sense. So yeah, I like road trips. I like going on walks and hiking, occasionally running, but that hasn't really happened in a while. But yeah, walks and hiking has happened a lot, especially since the pandemic started. I like handwriting postcards and letters, and that picked up a little bit in the summertime and has dwindled down again with teaching. But I'm much better, I think, at writing letters than I am at sometimes responding to emails or Facebook messages because they're physical. And again, it's the whole handwriting thing that I'm apparently so obsessed with. I like hanging out with my cat, obviously. I like going to museums, art museums, especially when it's possible to do that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to like seeing more people too, as we all start getting vaccinated. So that's something to look forward to coming up.
I think that kind of brings us to our end of our time. It's been a great talk. Thank you for sharing everything.
Thanks for asking all of these questions.
Happy to hopefully get the audience to get to know y'all and personalize some of the composers so it's not just sounds they hear, but they can link them to an actual person. Yeah, thank you for meeting with us.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I guess just one more question just to really close things out. Any projects you got coming up outside of this that you'd like the audience to know about? Just give yourself a little shameless plug.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, locally, through the Cleveland Composers Guild, I just finished writing a piece for their creativity project where I'm writing a piece for a local young pianist who'll perform that this summer. So that was really fun. He is a middle school student, so getting to write for him was a pleasure. Already a far better pianist than I will ever be. And I also have a commission coming up for the National Women's Music Festival. For their 2022 festival, I'm writing a piece for them for chorus and chamber orchestra. So I'm going to be getting started on that very soon. So that's the big thing coming up next.
That sounds awesome. It's great to hear you still have things going on to look forward to.
I am very lucky to still have things going on, and I'm very excited for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much for your time with the interview. And again, thanks so much for writing the piece. And
yeah, thank you for letting me write for you. It has been so much fun.